Yeah. Okay, now I figured out how to get rid of the thing on the top. I don't have to get back though.
No, don't even do it. Don't even do it then.
There was like a little.
We'll do it next time.
Hide.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know if Jason's on. Where is he at? I don't know if he ever.
Recording in progress.
All right, good.
Good afternoon, everyone. You want to start taking your seats maybe so we can go back to our program. All right, let's get started. My name is Diego Rodriguez. I'm the Senior Regional Nursing Director in Orange County. And I have a question for you. Did you know that the big tobacco industry once called the LGBTQ community the market niche? The market niche. Not is not a community to protect, but a target to explode. Today, we will hear how decades of targeted marketing, policy manipulation, and systemic neglect have impacted the health and well-being of this community, and what we can do to change the narrative. It is my honor to introduce Joseph Hayden. Joseph is our IT program manager in the Enterprise Technology Group at City of Hope. He has extensive experience working at United Healthcare, Optum, John Muir Health, and Stanford School of Medicine. He also taught at NYU and Touro College. He holds a law degree from Brooklyn Law School. Go ahead, boy. As well as a bachelor's degree on political science from City University of New York. He is passionate about combating the normalization of commercialized tobacco industry, with groups like LGBTQ minus tobacco in the San Francisco Bay Area. For many years, he has worked pro bono, traveling nationally and continuing to advocate about global devastation brought on by the tobacco industry, particularly regarding the effects on the LGBTQ plus and other targeted populations. So put your hands together. Joe, welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joseph Hayden, pronouns he, him, and I have this t-shirt. Thank you, City of Hope and Pride in the City for the opportunity to talk about an issue I'm very passionate about. In my presentation, I'll be citing empirical facts, but the opinions in this presentation are my own individually. They're not even necessarily the opinions of the organizations I volunteer with, and I do all this activism pro bono. When I say the industry in this presentation, I'm always talking about the commercial tobacco industry or big tobacco. Okay, see how I advance. Okay, I debated about going personal, but I think it's helpful to show how real people are affected. We're not just statistics. My dad was born in Monterey, California. I'm a second generation Californian, born right here in the Los Angeles area. A huge number of my beloved family members, most of whom live in Italy, are or were people who smoke. They are certainly not the enemy, but targets of an industry that pushes a highly addictive poison. I raised my daughter with the hope that our descendants would not have to face the prevalence of tobacco products that we faced. But here we are with new ways to poison the public coming out every year. She never even got to meet the grandfather that would have spoiled her. This is a picture from the Love Makes a Family exhibit that we were part of. It toured the world, and when I was on the board of Family Equality, a gay parenting rights organization. We attended Family Week many times in Provincetown, Massachusetts, with hundreds of other families headed by queer parents like me. I live in Vallejo, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area, with my no longer vaping partner and our dogs. We often foster dogs, as I'm on the board of the local Humane Society, and that's my daughter and me this past Father's Day, a couple weeks ago. Several years ago, Alexandra was handed a blunt, which she assumed was cannabis. She immediately felt irritable and was then appalled when told that it also had tobacco. She told me about it because she knew that we would both be horrified at the prospect of of her becoming addicted to tobacco given our family history. When my grandfather was stationed on Oahu, my young dad was handed loose, unpacked cigarettes. This is actually my father, called Lucy's, which of course came out without any warning label. The tobacco industry had some explaining to do, and I don't know if the younger people in the audience are going to understand that joke. But anyway, the industry agreed. The industry agreed to allow the warning labels in 1965, so they could thwart lawsuits. They also used the tactic of retaining virtually every formidable law firm so that there's always a plausible conflict of interest when someone wants to pursue liability claims. By the time my dad enlisted at age 17, he was already addicted. Military personnel have been encouraged to smoke even on the front lines, to my horror. When he was stationed in other countries and we lived abroad, American cigarettes were always well stocked on base. And we lived on base sometimes. Dad was one of many veterans in my family, and he served 27 years. Pressure to smoke was not an appropriate way to thank them for their service. Dad had a dry sense of humor, and it often made him the life of the party. He used to gather the kids around and ask, "Hey, do you kids know how to play this brand new game? It's called Far, Far Away." He had a bumper sticker that he didn't have the guts to put on his car because it was so contrarian, but it said, "Nuke the whales." It was therefore bemusing to him when a little precocious me would scotch tape handwritten signs on his nightstand that said, "Cancer cures smoking." Precocious me tried to teach stubborn dad that in school they taught it was bad for his health. I made sure he got the memo in crayon. It's never too early to teach the harm of tobacco in age-appropriate ways, even to elementary school kids. I really wanted Dad to live a long life. So for my birthday one year, he bought a smoke enders kit for himself. I appreciated the gesture. I just wish it would have worked. My dad took this really cute photo of our family. Years later, I noticed that my sister sitting next to me is playing with Dad's Camel cigarettes. In my kindergarten class, we had a clay project where we were encouraged to make ashtrays for our parents. I remember pressing my fingers into the side of the wet clay to create resting spots for his cigarettes. Sometimes my military father would run our household strictly, and being the eldest, I had the privilege to sit up front when Mom wasn't in the car. We were still in the driveway one day when Dad lit up. I instinctively started to roll down my window, but Dad screamed, "Roll that up, you need to be courteous to smokers." As a military family, we traveled and moved often. It was a fact of life that we would always sit in the smoking section of planes, if you can believe it these days, and because we were having to be courteous to Dad and these flight attendants, in the fuselage. Also, to be helpful as a son, I always ran ahead of my family to tell the maitre d' before being asked, "Table for 5, smoking." For years, when someone asked if I minded if someone smoked near me, I would quip, "My dad's a chimney, so go ahead." I started truly tasting food months after I moved out of my parents' home. Having smoke blown in my face my entire childhood dulled my sense of taste, and I've had to deal with my relationship with food since then. I now know that I was addicted to nicotine vicariously, and my siblings and I suffered from ear infections due to passive smoke. Later apologizing for what he put us through when he finally was convinced how harmful it was subjecting us to that, he often mentioned how lucky we were to be healthy. Not everyone's that lucky. Asthma rates, for example, are much higher in homes with smoking. I love this Mark Twain quote, by the way, but it wasn't very much like my macho dad to just go to the doctor. When he broke his arm one time working on his boat, that night he sawed off the cast because he was, quote, "too active for that shit." I warned him that his bones would not heal as fast at his age because that's the kind of smart aleck kid I was. So, at age 48, Dad did ask a doctor about this heartburn he was having. Well, he was actually having heart attacks for 3 years. So he was prepped for surgery and underwent a quintuple bypass that day. 1 month later, too weak to go to the store, he begged my mom to buy him more cigarettes. While the open heart surgery scars were still healing, he resumed smoking despite my distinct memory of the doctor telling us as his family that if he continued to smoke, he would die. And about 18 months later, he was fishing out in Half Moon Bay with his brother when something went wrong. That turned out to be hemorrhaging from an aortic aneurysm. In rush hour traffic, Dad lost consciousness while my uncle was driving, and despite surgery, died in the hospital at age 50. I was just planning to go to law school at that time. I was pissed off then, and now I still am, but not at him, but at the industry. He had himself grown to hate his dependency on smoking. My family was robbed of many years together, as he could statistically still be alive today. As a result of his premature death, my immigrant mom became a widow in her 40s. She was a brilliant woman, but understandably lost, in many ways, 10,000 miles from most of our family. Unfortunately, we have a family tradition of dying at 50 in my family. This is the only picture of my paternal grandmother and me. Like my daughter, I never got to know my grandparent because of this scourge. My beloved first cousin, Ivan, was very accomplished, but smoked heavily and died at age 35 from osteosarcoma in his pelvis. He suffered for at least 6 years of his life, despite traveling to Turkey, France, Spain, all over Italy for treatment. These pictures were taken before he became ill, of course. And as I put in this quote from Tobacco Free Kids, all these family members started smoking, as most people do, more than 95% of people, before they're even adults. Peddlers Pushing Poison was coined by me. I like alliteration. And these are some of the other sound bites that I usually use. Tobacco kills when used as intended. Tobacco is the most unregulated drug in the world. Tobacco executives are the biggest drug pushers in the world. And there is no medicinal benefit to commercial tobacco. We're talking about an American product created by Europeans that doesn't even resemble traditional tobacco, profiting on the idea of American greatness. Unfortunately, many around the world see this as a reason to emulate us, particularly with the normalization in entertainment, and more on that soon. So here are some numbers that I often use. 8 million people a year die prematurely from the leading cause of preventable death. I keep reminding dignitaries about this when tobacco legislation is in front of them so they can imagine the human suffering from a permitted legal product. This image here was at the UCSF's Billion Life Symposium that I attended earlier this year. And the translation in German is at the bottom, from German. And here's some more jargon. Referring to the product sold as commercial tobacco is how we distinguish traditional tobacco usage from indigenous Americans. In lieu of saying smokers, we endeavor to say people who smoke. Flavors are more obvious, but to continue to addict kids or attempt to, tobacco companies also have concepts of flavor like silver and other descriptive words because they're trying to get around flavor bans. Co-use, that's something that I alluded to earlier with my daughter, is using tobacco with cannabis or other substances. An example, as the example I share with my daughter. And then for the purposes of fresh air, legally, smoke is smoke. Even wildfire and campfire smoke is not good for us, which is why on orange sky days, the comparative damage to us is always in they always use the analogy of how many packs of cigarettes we would be smoking. And because smoking laws now include vapes as well, we should not have to change signage to include the words vaping or add vaping graphics. And I myself, on an international flight in 2015, sat next to a guy who thought it was okay to vape next to me. For a moment, legally, it was given a pass because so many bought into the cockamamie industry claims of it being harmless water vapor. Of course, I complained by telling him in Italian that I still didn't want it anywhere near me. There's always one in every crowd, right? Someone who comes up to me and says, but my grandma smoked every day until she was in her late 90s. Well, I say to those people, you can also survive after putting on a blindfold and running across the freeway, but why would you do that? So there is an undeniable, long-standing target of our LGBTQ population, especially in our youth. Organizations like LGBTQ minus tobacco, with whom I volunteer, are funded because of empirical evidence of the health disparities as shown here. I think this is what Diego was referring to earlier. So there are many smoking gun documents, smoking in quotes, gun documents. The R.J. Reynolds Company had Project Scum, targeting gays and the homeless in the San Francisco neighborhood of the Castro and the Tenderloin. And of course, SCUM stood for Subcultural Urban Marketing. Even during the height of the AIDS crisis, queer lives were cheap to these profiteers, so hastening the death of immune-compromised people was just another business opportunity. Which brings us to what a monster is, someone pretending to be our friend with ulterior motives. I love exposés, and this one is priceless. with just the right amount of snark. And I'm going to play this video. Hopefully it'll work.
So the smoking
How come you're
lounge-
dressed up like that?
Because we are promoting the smoking lounge.
Oh, what company's doing that?
Lucky Strike is doing that for the GLAAD Media Awards.
Well, I'm confused about the connection between Lucky Strike and GLAAD. Lucky Strike is sponsoring the GLAAD Awards because they are very involved in, the gay and lesbian acts and all that stuff. So they're there to sponsor them and promote their product also.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think about that. I think that's great that they're actually getting involved, in helping, the community realize what's really going on in the world.
Great costume.
Thank you very much.
Do you get to keep it?
I don't know,
I see, let's see, I'm gonna focus in on
Okay.
the pelvic area.
Yes,
What's that about?
I don't know. They just
Have you ever worn anything like that before?
actually no, but I'm an actor, so
Oh, all right,
I'm just playing a part.
look at that. And I see the symbol for two men together.
The S,
Two women together.
check myself out.
one woman by herself on the right.
Oh, wow.
Hi, who are you guys with?
With the Coalition of Lavender Americans on Smoking and Health. And how about you? Are you with GLAAD? Hi there, so we're at the, where are we, the Lucky Strike Lounge?
Yeah, and
Sir,
what can we help you out with?
hey there, we're just documenting the smoking room in the lesbian, gay, transgender, LGBT venue here at the St. Francis Hotel on, it's today, June 9th, Saturday night. So there's a special smoking lounge here at the GLAAD Media Awards. And even though smoking is illegal in restaurants, bars, and hotels, GLAAD has taken upon itself to enlist Lucky Strike, Brown and Williamson Company, as a corporate sponsor. Even though 36% of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people smoke. And also with the incidence of HIV and the connection between early death, if you're HIV positive, and smoking, it seems like such a strange thing to be linking tobacco, which kills and hurts so many people in our community, and the Lucky Strike Lounge, which is just all about fun, but not about cancer or emphysema. Anyone have anything to say?
I mean, we provide the lounge for people in attendance who choose to smoke. We're 21 and over.
Would this be promoting smoking
No,
by making
providing
a special lounge?
we just want to provide a service so that people who are smokers at the event have a place to go to.
You're from California?
No.
Okay. You know the law in California? You know where smokers go to smoke? You know where the smoking section is? It's outside. And the reason is that secondhand smoke, for people like this, I don't know if she's a smoker or not, but for people who have to work in a smoky environment, they're they get 5 times the level of cancer-causing agents in their urine. It's been published. It's true.
If you have questions that you might want to just go ahead and call our headquarters in Louisville, and we can give you the 800 number for that.
Oh, your headquarters, you work with which company?
Brown and Williams.
Brown and Williams.
Would you like that number?
Sure, I'd like that.
Let me get that for you.
Okay, thank you. You work with GLAAD or volunteer, but he's with Brown and Williamson.
If you have questions, like he mentioned, please feel free to call the 800 number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. When you say the 800 number, you mean the GLAAD 800 number or the
No,
Lucky
that's the Brown
Strike?
and Williamson.
I'm getting kind of confused because it seems like GLAAD and Lucky Strike are kind of the same thing here tonight, like smoking and gay, same thing. I don't know who's who.
If you have any questions about Lucky Strike, please feel free to call the 800.
The 800. What is that 800 number for our viewers? 1-800.
Sorry?
1-800.
Oh, 1-800-L-STRIKE.
L-Strike. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Sounds like GLAAD came to their senses eventually. Okay. Go to the next one. Okay. So speaking on the last slide, my friend Bob Gordon, who founded Cigarettes and Pharmacies Don't Mix, why should the same companies that sell us medicine also sell us poison? So right now, if you're in California, you should call your representatives because AB 957 is pending in Sacramento. And it could do what should have been done already, which is to prohibit pharmacies from selling cigarettes. And this is a quote from a queer woman who used to smoke, just exemplifying how stress is correlated to the rates of smoking by our community. And big tobacco knows that the stress is causing us to be their consumers, particularly in times of political strife. Marginalized groups turn toward these coping mechanisms in greater numbers, and it affects our communities disproportionately, particularly those with intersectionality. There are so many issues I have with this ad, being part Muckleshoot Indian myself. The co-opting of Native American iconography for a European product bastardizing traditional tobacco usage is beyond contempt. To then use that to appeal to gay people and lecture us about freedoms is racist, homophobic, and evil. I'm not sure if you can see the tagline that says, the people of Santa Fe Natural Tobacco Company, but American Spirit brand has no ties to Native American bands or tribes. This product is completely owned by Reynolds, partnering internationally with British and Japanese tobacco corporations. Lest they forget the trans community, don't worry, Big Tobacco doesn't value their life. This is an ad on Instagram. Perhaps the most politically targeted group in society right now, the trans community, statistically has the highest likelihood of using tobacco products, as shown on the previous slide. More empirical evidence here from UCLA. It wasn't just my imagination that in gay spaces there were more smoking than in society generally. Not only does the industry leapfrog with new products that are not subject to full scrutiny by government regulators, the U.S. has always catered to the industry for many years, even subsidized tobacco farmers, if you can believe it. The industry still uses tactics like coupons with as much advertising as they can legally spend to attract new customers. Fortunately, this guy had a wide variety of brands to choose from when he was recuperating in the 50s. The whistleblower from a tobacco model that had the guts to share this quote that is hard for me to even say out loud, so I'll let you read it off the screen. He had it after losing his brother to cancer. This gobsmacking quote is widely recognized among tobacco activists, and it's quoted in many lawsuits. Even if my progeny were not considered to be politically back, given my daughter's being half Black, I was unnerved in 1996 when I saw in law school that this periodical called The National Jurist. The front cover was trying to show the diversity of lawyers and law students, but they just had to portray the successful woman of color with a cigar. I immediately wrote an angry letter to the editor, which they published. I'm proud that I was this vocal even 29 years ago. Well, couple months ago, nearly 30 years later, I got an email news update about the Met Gala. And this was the primary image. And the quote was, "Black excellence." I sent the article and image together with my letter to the editor from 1996 to my friends at the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. And I believe they intend to make a public comment about their own belief about what Black excellence is. Especially after I sent them this. The same week as the Met Gala article, the amazingly talented Quinta Brunson hosted Saturday Night Live. Known for creating and starring in the award-winning Abbott Elementary about a public school, these two bumpers made my jaw drop, particularly because she is so inspiring to the youth. Do you see a pattern? So Proposition 31 in 2022 prohibited most flavors from being sold here in California, including menthol. Menthol has been used since the 1950s, in particular to target the African American community. As intended, the majority of mentholated cigarettes are consumed by Black Americans, so it's not a surprise that the industry was insidiously at the ready with these non-menthol packages for Californians, branded just like the mentholated product. As a historical reminder, the United States kidnapped an African diaspora and forced enslaved people to pick tobacco among other products. And that same tobacco industry still pursues their descendants to purchase the product with direct targeting and advertising in Black media. And they still fight like hell to keep a menthol ban from going national. Al Sharpton's National Action Network tours the country. Tobacco front companies underwrite his events using cryptic acronyms, but his connections to this side gig are well documented. As if he doesn't have enough of a bullhorn on MSNBC, he debates the right for Black people to choose whatever cigarettes they want, meaning menthol. Unfortunately, he was influential in encouraging the Biden administration not to regulate menthol cigarettes, warning that it would hurt voting results. My colleague from the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council was very careful to inform me recently that he is no reverend and that he actually was a bona fide pimp for years before he became famous. And with the current administration, a menthol ban will certainly not happen. Susie Wiles is proudly in bed with Big Tobacco as a lobbyist. She's his chief of staff. Not to mention the pre-election Surgeon General's report on tobacco health disparities has already been removed from the government website. Avatar was the highest grossing movie of all time when it was released. I saw it in IMAX 3D. So I got to have the product placement you're seeing a glimpse of here really up close. Picture this, a physician hundreds of years in the future on a spaceship. There's an adaptive environment for humans on another planet with an incompatible atmosphere. Apparently, they had enough oxygen for her to smoke a combustible cigarette in the medical rooms and in patients' faces. Good thing they brought enough smokes light years away from Earth so she could show how little we've medically advanced. What could possibly go wrong? Shame on director James Cameron for his creative choice. As if his budget wasn't big enough, it's illegal for Hollywood productions to be subsidized by Big Tobacco, as they once routinely were. As a sci-fi buff, I often wonder what aliens from outer space really would think of us foolish human beings putting carcinogenic fumes into our lungs. Pulmonologists uniformly agree that the only thing that should be going into our lungs is clean air, as intended. And a side note about Sigourney Weaver, I have some home video of our daughters playing together in Central Park, and I was always so an extra in Ghostbusters too, so, we're really besties in real life, but anyway. The Nissan song of Netflix's recent sci-fi series is London 2024. The cast of fashion model PhDs were stressed out by aliens or something. What else would highly educated scientists use to cope with? Every protagonist, including the dopey cop, all smoked combustible cigarettes extensively on screen, not even vapes. Extreme camera close-ups lingered on them, cigarettes dangling, and somehow none of them ever coughed. As for the director, given his explanation here, I suggest he goes back to film school, but more likely he's on the take. So my dad started smoking this brand long before this ad campaign, but aren't cartoons for kids? Who are they appealing to with this confident macho animal with a penis nose on the left? Someone in their design department must have laughed all the way to the bank. The depiction of Joe Chemo on the right might be in poor taste, but that's not the cartoon that got blasted everywhere for potential child smokers to see on Africa. This one must have saved them a lot of money because they had only do the photo shoot once for the mainstream and gay periodicals. And I would say this one didn't age very well. It's, in just one ad, you have misogyny, infantilizing, and fat shaming, but you too can be thinner smoking these narrow cigarettes. Finally, a cigarette for ladies. Targeting women generally came later as the consumer base of men was diminishing. I wonder why. At first, it was not considered ladylike to smoke, so to the rescue came a skinny cigarette that sponsored a sports tournament. I protested with others during the Virginia Slims tennis tournament at Madison Square Garden in the 90s, when none of the athletes smoked, by the way. The brand's catchphrase, as you can see in this ad on the left, was, "You've come a long way, baby." So we handed out bumper stickers that said, "You've coughed up enough phlegm, baby." And on the right, you can see we made sure to target lesbians too. So what can we do? Let's use the power of our dollars, as I'll get into soon, and stop the junk science and misinformation, such as the suggestion that vaping is healthy. In neighborhoods where fresh food is scarce, one can point one's arm in every direction and find tobacco for sale. Retailers wallpapered with advertising never have to worry about tobacco expiring. It's so bothersome to have to rotate out fruits and vegetables, right? Meanwhile, candy-colored wrapped tobacco products are always available for kids to see in droves. Flavors and flavor concepts are imperative to avoid kids tasting the tobacco. How do we expect kids to abstain when a virtual bonanza of advertising cheap products that curb appetite for the wrong reason are beckoning to them? There are more statistics on how tobacco use among queer youth is more prevalent than non-queer youth. Third-hand smoke lingers in cars and homes long after the use of tobacco, adding to societal costs. And that creates strange bedfellows with realtors and used car salespeople, who agree with the logic that their bottom line is affected by devalued assets. I use this sticker here, boycott handout, so I didn't inadvertently spend my family's grocery budget on blood money. And on the right is a 1990 protest flyer called "Fags Against Fags," meaning the British word for cigarettes, against something called the Whitney, quote, Museum. It's a disgrace that this organization exists and is fully funded by Philip Morris, which is now rebranded and euphemized as Altria. Closeted Mayor Ed Koch was at this grand opening in New York City as if it's a legitimate place for art and not a giant tax write-off and advertising gimmick for tobacco, to say nothing of the AIDS death that were at their height at the time. When I was in law school, I used to get invited to events at the Whitney, but I refused to step foot inside and I let people know why. This satire of the Whitney mentions the Virginia Slims tennis tournament and music underwriting, which the industry has done all over Asia to push tobacco internationally. Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids has worked internationally to thwart the industry's efforts with many youth ambassadors. And it's no coincidence that the Whitney, I refuse to call it a museum because it's always Whitney with air quotes, favors artists that have depictions of smoking. I remember being on a BART train and seeing an ad for a touring Whitney exhibit in San Francisco. What a perfect opportunity for them to show carefree people crossing the Golden Gate Bridge on a motorcycle with cigarettes dangling from their mouths for rapid transit passengers to see, skirting the law and advertising. And some of you may recognize this AbFab quote I have on the left here. So, hurry kids, studio art classes available at the Whitney. If you're aged 8 to 12 and want to learn how to include cigarettes in your art, you can show up there. And I was saying, maybe I should have submitted my clay masterpiece from the previous slide. There are a whole lot of archives of commercial for tobacco, which are a complete embarrassment that can be found online. But everywhere that they can get away with it, the industry still advertises. The final sport that they sponsored was Formula One. While the industry is more subtle about it now for front companies, tobacco ads on cars were only banned in 2006. Okay, so this question of what our retirement funds invest in usually wakes people up, as most don't realize that they could be inadvertently bolstering this toxic industry. I'm proud that we come to work and in our own ways help fight cancer and diabetes. There's another way that we could do that passively. Like many retirement plans, City of Hopes does not make it easy to select green index funds to avoid supporting the industry that contributes to so much of the health issues we fight. Green funds yield respectful amounts, but of course, when you have a business model based on an addictive product like tobacco, that has even done better historically. For those who want the option, we have to change the retirement plan. Organizations like even the American Medical Association were embarrassed and horrified when they realized that these diversified stocks contributed to the problem, so they divested. I think it's about time City of Hope realizes what options it gives its own employees. So I ask you, if you're a COH employee like me, go to your intranet and ask HR how we can select green funds. I guess I don't have it. Oh, yes, here it is. I used AI recently to find a number of Fidelity specific green funds that would be available. And I did contact HR to see why it was impossible for me to pick those green funds. They said that the Fidelity people said that we have to go to HR and COH leadership would have to change our agreement with them. When I told the Fidelity advisor that I would not contribute 1 cent to the index funds that contribute to tobacco, I was given the advice to just invest in lower yielding US bonds. At least I can sleep at night until we can hopefully encourage City of Hope to make the change. So what's being sold in store near you? A plethora of cheap tobacco products that are meant to be affordable to kids and hidden from adults. Cheap cigarillos unwrap very easily to add cannabis or other substances, and they're so inexpensive that in some cities you can get 2 for 99 cents. It wouldn't take much of an allowance for a kid to get this and get addicted. Similarly, flavored wraps are often used to skirt flavor bans and can be used in the same way. There are e-coupons and celebrities who promote poison on Instagram and other social media, even though electronic advertising of tobacco was prohibited decades ago. Smokeless commercial tobacco has been around for 500 years since the colonization of North America. Snuff can still be bought in most tobacco retailers. My grandpa was a wonderful guy, but his gross spittoons were ubiquitous, and he even kept one at our house when he visited. You can bid on this one on eBay right now. Lest people think that smokeless tobacco is benign, snuff and nicotine pouches like Zyn are intended to be discreet, but still cause mouth and other cancers. So last week, I attended a webinar on the Zynification of California. The industry is calling these nicotine products smokeless tobacco alternatives, as if that makes them safe enough for your kids to play with on TikTok. Isn't that, darling? There are also online challenges of people putting as many pouches into their mouth as possible. What could possibly go wrong? The lack of tobacco in these products does not exempt them from horrible health consequences, including serious gum damage. The saliva with the nicotine is swallowed and distributed throughout the body, of course, not to mention the environmental damage of these discarded pouches. So I have a quick little soundless video here of RFK Jr., our questionably qualified Secretary of Health and Human Services, apparently setting an example by not so discreetly putting a Zyn between his cheek and gums during a recent congressional hearing. Unbelievable. So let's play a game. Okay. By design, these avoid parents, teachers, and school staff from noticing what's in a book bag of youth. Youth advocates often lament that they cannot comfortably go to the bathroom on campus because they are hotboxed with smoke. And why leave class? My teacher friends say that the kids are charging their USB appearing vapes on laptops in class, inhaling discreetly by making a fist over the tiniest of vapes, and then exhaling into long-sleeved apparel. The Public Health Law Center recently addressed in a webinar the long-standing exemption in rehabs allowing people in recovery to smoke. There's now empirical evidence that of the dramatically shortened lives because of that. This never made sense to me if living one's best life is the point. So there is now a push to abstain from tobacco as well in rehabs. Most of you may recall the tobacco executives who uniformly denied nicotine was addictive before Congress with their unscientific opinions. The industry would have you believe that they are harm reduction organizations now, touting non-combustible devices as healthier alternatives, but don't believe the continued junk science given that one vape can have the equivalent of hundreds of cigarettes. These same companies will never choose to cease selling cigarettes so long as people buy them. I got involved in the early 1990s and started working on the macro level with organizations like Action on Smoking Health based in Washington, D.C. When I lived in New York City, I also did what I could to fight tobacco ads on taxi cab roofs, bus stops, and billboards. We had some success. In recent years, I became very involved in the Bay Area with smoke-free bar patios, smoke-free multi-unit housing, and tobacco retail licenses. I'm not going to read all these, I promise, but even with the passage of the partial flavor ban in California, there's very little enforcement. Over 200 California cities and counties have passed in the form of TRL, especially because they are revenue neutral. They pay for themselves. This list has the element of a robust TRL like my city of Vallejo now has, which I'm proud to have contributed to. And we specifically had code enforcement, not armed police officers, do the checking, or we will have them do the checking. There's also specific language to not punish minors who buy, but only the retailers that sell to minors. Prior to this ordinance, Vallejo was known for having the highest youth tobacco sales rates in the Bay Area. Now that the TRL is passed, mandated checks ensure that the penalties keep retailers as compliant as possible and reveal who the bad actors and who are addicting our youth. Suspending licenses to sell and confiscating inventory really discourages retailers from selling illegally and is far more effective than fines. For years, county health officers have offered retailers to change their business models to sell something healthy with an assistance program. But the last time I checked, 0 retailers followed up in my county. So smoke-free multi-unit housing is, so the reason we don't have smoking indoors where people work is largely based on flight attendants following a class action lawsuit. That was then extended to all workplaces, including bars and restaurants, with some exceptions being casinos on sovereign land. And very recently, California Governor Newsom shifted his position on protecting employees in California with pressure from celebrities like Whoopi Goldberg. He made an exception to indoor smoking laws to allow cities, if they choose, to allow cannabis lounges that allow smoking. This is a dangerous step backward. Indoor smoking laws by default do not pertain to residents, so that brings me to smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinances. Walls don't protect people, as this graphic shows. Electric sockets, open windows, and balconies don't stop the smoke from drifting. This is a health equity issue, but yet one of the most controversial ordinances I've worked on in recent years because people who are in multi-unit housings tend to be less insured and less able to just relocate. They could be children, the elderly, pregnant, wheelchair-bound, or immunocompromised, and they have a right to breathe fresh air in their homes. And the onus should not be on those people to prove that the smoke is tobacco or cannabis, by the way. So, some countries and states have instituted laws that prohibit the sales of tobacco to people born after a certain year. At last count, about a dozen cities in Massachusetts are doing this. Since the age requirement is 21, they recently banned anyone born after 2004 from ever buying tobacco. That's a smoke-free generation law. Because of the popularity of those, Massachusetts, which incidentally has the population with the highest IQ in the US, is now considering a statewide law to do the same thing. Hawaii also proposed to make it exponentially more expensive with each decade one is born in, which is another form of smoke-free generation. Santa Cruz, which of course is on the coast, was worried about what's going into the ocean, so it became the first jurisdiction in the world to ban the sale of filtered cigarettes based on pollution. Cigarette filters are made of non-biodegradable plastic and are the most littered item on Earth. And that brings us to Endgame. The cigarette century time has come. Endgame is what I entitled this presentation, and it can mean a lot of things, although it doesn't necessarily translate easily into other languages. The sense of what we are trying to accomplish is being taken seriously by many countries that have an interest in protecting the population, and the government's job, after all, is to protect people. Even though I'm still fighting the same industry decades later, my colleagues and I are on the right side of history, and we want to reach a future with zero tobacco deaths. Manhattan Beach and Beverly Hills have been the two test cases in California. They no longer allow the sale of commercial tobacco at all. I look forward to other cities in California and elsewhere following suit. So tobacco is a distinctly American product, which is manipulated by European settlers and foisted upon the world. A lot of international progress on tobacco is based on human and civil rights. There's a lot of, so I just wanted to point out a couple of, as I finish up here, New Zealand had a genocide lawsuit based on their indigenous people not having a connection to tobacco. Mexico, to their credit, has the strictest tobacco control laws in the world. And India, being the second largest producer of tobacco, also has very strict penalties, and no e-cigarettes are allowed. All right, here's some cessation information. I'm happy to share these slides if anybody wants them. Here are my sources. And happy Pride Month. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for this opportunity to fire hose you with this stuff. Thank you.
We are wrapping up almost, huh? Congratulations, everyone, for sticking around. We appreciate it. Thank you for being here today. It's been a full, meaningful day, and I know many of us are feeling